on.
I should make sure I'm silenced, which I'm not. Okay, now I am. Hello, everybody.
Good evening.
And I need to skirt it back down.
That's kind of important.
Yeah.
Hope y'all are doing well. That everything has been...
Oh, that was bright.
It's been nice over these last couple of weeks for y'all. Oh, gosh. Was it 2 weeks ago we did the lighthouses up in New York.
Yes.
Been a busy 2 weeks.
All right.
Had a holiday weekend in there. Hope everybody had a good Labor Day weekend. And hope that everybody is enjoying the start of fall. I don't care if it's still technically summer. It's September.
Fall.
It's September. It's fall. So
Okay, that's not better.
that's what I'm saying. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And to celebrate, we have some flavors of fall for us tonight. We have our sweet potato and sage beer from Ardent Brewery right over in Scott's Edition, which, okay, you're taking first sip. All right, fine. Well, that's okay. I got another drink here. It's just a maple whiskey from New York. So, flavors of fall. Here we go.
Cheers. We discovered this one when we were at Oktoberfest for St. Benedict's, and we have fallen in love with it ever since.
I think I had it before that, but still,
That's when I first had it.
always make it a point to have some of it at Oktoberfest, which, by
It's
the way...
coming up, and we are sponsors.
Yes, we are. So, what do we got going on? So, this coming Friday is Friday the 13th.
Y'all need to buy your tickets.
Yeah,
Seriously.
We got it. We got a tour. It's a Churchill tour.
Yeah.
It's Friday the 13th. You need to go out and do something spooky. So
and
come
you
on
got our
out.
two lovely tag team ladies out there, Tiffany and Marsha,
Mhm.
hosting and guiding. So you need to sell this out so they can both go out and guide. And then some.
Yep. So
Just saying.
yes. So Friday the 13th, and
And then the following weekend.
well, wait. The next day, Richmond Comic-Con.
Yes, we will be at Richmond Comic Con at the Raceway.
Yep. So up at the Richmond Raceway Complex, we will have a vendor booth there, along with a lot of other cool con people.
Yep.
So you can come on out and see us there on Saturday, and then the following weekend
Is
is Oktoberfest. We will have tours again Friday, Saturday night, but we will also be hanging out around St. Benedict's Oktoberfest.
Oh no, I have to eat Jaeger Schnitzel and big pretzels.
Yes. And drink beer.
And drink beer.
So we'll be spending a little bit of time hanging out there every single day. If you come on by, keep an eye out for us. We'll be around. And also that Saturday, also concurrently, which the 21st? 21st, yes. We are also sponsoring a film premiere at the Bird Theater.
We'll be walking the red carpet.
A locally produced horror film called Solitude. So you can go and you can actually get your tickets for Solitude right now as well from the Bird website. So yeah, we got a lot coming up, and that's just in the next 2 weeks before we see you again, which will, well, we got
October.
we got this whole show ahead of us, so we won't get too far ahead of ourselves here. But yes, I hope that you're doing well, and thank you so much for dropping those links in there, Patrick. Much appreciated. And hope that you are doing well as well. Yes. So.
Sorry, this is going to be an interesting thing. I have not done a show with glasses in a while, and the glare is quite fun.
Oh, yes, because you're having, by the
Yes,
time...
I'm having eye surgery in a week and a half.
So yeah, there's that too. I mean, LASIK. It's LASIK.
It's LASIK. We're going to get rid of these permanently, so I can actually see again. It just means I can't do makeup for the premiere, I just realized. Because I'm not allowed to do makeup for a week afterwards.
Oh dear.
Oh well, you're just going to get the regular face, not a fun face.
Okay. But anyways, what are we here to talk about tonight?
Am I reflecting something, buddy, or is there something crawling on the wall over there?
Who knows? It's Nico. It could be neither. It could be...
Nico is the king of playing Made You Look.
He could be communing with our local spirit.
Or he could be receiving the download from the Mother Kitty ship.
Whatever's going on, Nico's being Nico. We'll see if he decides to come on out. Or come on come on screen this evening.
Yes.
But yeah, so tonight we are here to talk about British legends. We're going to take a little bit of a detour away from our traditional spooky stuff, if you will.
I mean, we're going into spooky season, so that's all types of creatures.
Yes. And then,
and this definitely covers all types of creatures.
Yeah. I'm just saying we're getting a little away from the ghosties, if you will.
Yes, we're going to go for the vamps and the mummies and, well...
Yeah. There's a mummy. There's a couple of vampires. And then there's
an
something.
attacker.
We'll get there. We'll get there. Yeah. We're getting ahead of ourselves again.
He's a stalker. How about that? Let's
He's
start with
something.
that. Apparently, mythology, folklore, and legend. That page that I follow just actually brought up his tale recently, and apparently there have been sightings recently.
I'm not surprised. I mean, he is a very prominent English legend.
Yep. So
but yes,
we're getting ahead of ourselves.
We're getting ahead of ourselves, and it is, by the way, British legends.
British. Yes, it's not English.
We had been saying
British.
English, and then I actually started to read the script that you put together, and I decided that I did not want to get a lifetime ban from Scotland.
No, we want that. We want to be able to go home.
So yes,
because it literally is home.
So yes, I changed that to British because yes.
Sorry, Scotland.
And of all the places in Scotland,
that's the one we don't want to.
Well, yeah, Glasgow.
Yeah.
Yeah, you call them English?
Oh, that's war.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there was a correction in the titling of this episode. We went from English legends to British legends because, well, we're not sticking to just England. But our first stop is in England for tonight.
We're going to Manchester. So, Manchester, the year 1828, the early 1800s, were struck by a fever for all things Egyptian. Thank you, Napoleon. Anyway, in the wake of Napoleon's invasion of Egypt and Syria between 1798 and 1801, the history of this corner of the world was thrust into the spotlight. And even though the English had long been aware of Egypt, some had spent some time exploring its mysteries, general interest in pyramids, mummies, other artifacts, saw a notable spike after the French invasion. And that would be what made this object at the Manchester Natural History Society all that much more interesting in 1828. It was a mummified body, but it wasn't from Egypt, like so many others had been that were displayed across England. The particular mummy had not been plundered from a pyramid or a crypt in Egypt. No, this particular mummy was homespun. It was the body of one Hannah Beswick, a wealthy Manchester woman who had died 70 years earlier. Hannah's wrapped remains were displayed in a glass case between mummies from Egypt and Peru, and it proved to be very popular with the paying public. But how did this lady from a respectable Manchester family end up as an attraction that would become known as the Manchester Mummy? Well, let's talk about this. In 1688, Hannah was born into the Beswick family of Cheatwood Old Hall. When she was 18, Hannah inherited a considerable fortune when her father died. Hannah moved into a manor house called Birchen Bower, and it was to the northeast of Manchester. Now she led a rather unremarkable and comfortable life. This is a very agreeable existence. However, she was shaken by the death of her brother, John. Just before the funeral, as the mourners were about to close John's coffin, somebody saw John's eyelids flicker. The family physician, Dr. Charles White, stepped up, examined the body, and declared that John was quite still alive, actually, and much to the shock of all those in attendance. Unsurprisingly, the funeral was canceled. John was taken home, where he recovered consciousness a few days later and lived for many, many more years. Now, this event would be considered a lucky break by many, perhaps even something to be laughed about once the little, initial shock had worn off. But it was hardly unheard of. In the 1700s, comas were something that were poorly understood, and resuscitation techniques were primitive, resulting in numerous near misses and even some very unfortunate burials of people who were still, in fact, alive. Horrific stories circulated giving details of those who had been exhumed only to find their fingers bloodied and their shrouds torn, people who had died while trying to escape their coffins and their tombs. Hannah may still have had her brother, but she was terrified of the idea of such a near miss could befall her as well. So when Hannah wrote her will, dated the 25th of July of 1757, less than a year before she died, she demanded her body be kept above ground and regularly examined for all signs of life until it was certain she was dead. That said, there seems to have been some confusion over the terms of Hannah Beswick's will. Rumors said that she left £25,000, equivalent to about £3 million today, to Dr. Charles White, provided that he delayed her burial until he was sure that she was dead. In reality, her will actually states that Dr. White should only get £100 and that £400 should be spent on funeral expenses. There is much debate and speculation over how the $400 was actually allocated. Thank you. But many think that Dr. White may have been allowed to keep any excess funds from the funeral fund, therefore providing a motivation to ensure that the funeral never took place. To aid in this, Dr. White actually embalmed Hannah's body, despite the fact that Hannah's will did not request embalming, and stated that a burial should only be postponed until there was no doubt she was dead. In addition to the financial motives, Dr. White may not have been able to resist possessing a mummified human. Like many scientifically inclined gentlemen of his period, White had a collection of curiosities and a hoard of specimens that were ethically questionable to possess, among them the skeleton of Thomas Higgins, an infamous highwayman who had been hanged. Now, the exact method that Dr. White used to create the Manchester mummy isn't known, but there are some theories. He had been a student of the anatomist Dr. William Hunter, who developed the technique of arterial embalming, which involved filling the body's veins and arteries with a mixture of turpentine, vermilion, and oil of lavender and rosemary. The organs were removed and shrunk, fluids drained, and the body was washed with alcohol. The organs were then put back into the body's cavities, filled with a plaster of Paris, and finally the body was sewn up. The openings were stuffed with a camphor, which is a natural waxing substance, and the corpse was coated in tar. It's likely that Dr. White used such a procedure to transform Hannah into the Manchester mummy.
Sorry, I should have thrown a trigger warning on that.
Embalming is never pretty.
No, it's not.
Those of us that were fascinated back in 6th and 8th grades when we were studying these things, it's never pretty.
No.
At least we didn't describe how they got the brain out. Just saying. Alright, so Hannah's money was first kept at Ann Cook's Hall, the house of a member of her family. Soon after, she was moved to White's home, where she was kept in a case of a grandfather clock. News of the Manchester mummy soon spread, and visitors streamed to White's house to view her.
Uh-oh.
Pardon? White entertained them by whipping back a curtain that covered where the clock's face would have been to reveal the embalmed face of Hannah. When White died in 1813, he left the Manchester mummy to a friend, Dr. Ollier. Upon Ollier's death in 1828, the mummy was given to the Museum of Manchester Natural History Society. It soon became one of the museum's most popular items and began to widely be referred to as the Manchester mummy. Many paid the admission to see Hannah in the museum's entrance hall, but at least her relatives were allowed to visit her for free. Consider
Small concession.
Now, I know you all are waiting for Patrick to pop a photo of the Manchester mummy up on the screen here. Unfortunately, no photos or sketches of the Manchester mummy have survived, but the historian Philip Wentworth left us a description. The body was well preserved, but the face was shriveled and black. The legs and trunk were tightly bound in a strong cloth, and the body, which was that of a little old woman, was in a glass coffin-shaped case. In 1867, the museum, which was experiencing some financial difficulties, was bought by Owens College, a forerunner of the University of Manchester. Around the time of this sale, it was decided that Hannah was irrevocably and unmistakably dead. Without doubts concerning her mortality resolved, it was felt that the terms of her will should be respected and she should finally be given a burial. It's also worth pointing out that the public's fascination with the Manchester mummy was finally starting to wane. Burying the Manchester mummy wouldn't be a simple matter, however. In 1837, the UK had enacted a law stating that burials cannot take place unless a doctor has issued a death certificate. As Hannah had been dead for over a century, there was never a certificate drawn up. So an appeal had to be submitted to the Secretary of State, who then ordered her burial. With permission also granted from the Bishop of Manchester, Hannah Beswick could finally be laid to rest, and on the 22nd of July of 1868, Hannah was buried in Humphreys Cemetery over 110 years after she had died. The Manchester mummy was interred in an unmarked plot, as there were fears such a famous corpse might be a target for grave robbers. And with that, Hannah, aka the Manchester mummy, has become a British legend.
Drink it away.
Really.
All right. So now we are going to take our one excursion up into Scotland for this evening as we head to Glasgow. On the evening of the 23rd of September, 1954, so really not all that long ago. I mean, we're talking...
Modern era.
Yeah, not that long. 70 years ago.
It's so modern era.
Yes, I know it is. But yeah, 70 years ago. And almost, we're just shy, 2 weeks shy of the 70th anniversary of this event. So, Glasgow police on this night received a call summoning them to the Southern Necropolis, a vast cemetery in the Gorbals, one of the city's poorest neighborhoods.
That's not the one we used to do,
No.
I don't think so.
When Constable Alex Deeprose arrived a few minutes later, he couldn't believe the sight that confronted him. Hundreds of children were swarming over the graveyard. Some clutched crosses and crucifixes. Others brandished axes, staves, and knives. The oldest kids were around 14. The youngest could barely even toddle. Constable Deeprose watched in amazement as the children searched among the gravestones, peered behind trees, and prowled around elaborate Victorian tombs. The scene was made even more bizarre and hellish by the steelworks at the end of the cemetery, which was throwing up flames, belching smoke, and sending the scent of sulfur across the necropolis. Dark figures moved in and out of the clouds of rolling fog. The scene was punctuated by childish cries of, "There he is!" and "No, he's there!" as the horde of children swarmed from one shadow to the next. Constable Deeprose asked a group of children what they were doing, and to which they replied, "Hunting the Gorbals vampire."
Oh.
A 7-foot-tall monster with long metal fangs. They claimed the vampire had captured and eaten 2 boys and was living in the graveyard. More police arrived, but they couldn't persuade the children to give up their quest. Only when it started to rain and a local headmaster told everyone to stop being ridiculous did the children disperse. The next night, however, the young vampire hunters were back, and the night after that, though in smaller numbers. But as the children's interest in the monster waned, the Gorbals vampire began to cause disquiet among adults. Parents earnestly asked the police if there was any truth in the legend. The story got into the national press, questions were asked in Parliament, and a major panic saw changes in the law. So how real was the Gorbals vampire? Well, the Gorbals vampire certainly seemed real to the children who hunted him. On the first day of the panic, rumors of the monster spread from school to school. Ronnie Sanderson, who was 8 when he took part in the vampire hunt, said, "It all started in the playground." The word was there that a vampire and everyone was going to head out there after school. At 3 o'clock, the school emptied and everyone made a beeline for it. We sat there for ages on the wall, waiting and waiting. Finally, I think someone saw somebody wandering about and the cry went up, "There's the vampire!" Another of the young vampire hunters, Tam Smith, said the red light and smoke from the steelworks would flare up and make all the gravestones leap. You could see figures walking about at the back, all lined in red lights. The sighting of a bonfire near the cemetery led to even more screams that the vampire was burning the remains of his victims. Despite the determination of the youngsters to hunt down their vampire, there were no records of any missing or murdered children around the time of the Gorbals vampire incident. So, if no vampire was skulking about, where did the story come from?
All right, so here we go. Facts within the legends.
Myths of iron-toothed monsters have haunted Glasgow for generations. Parents sometimes warned their badly behaved offspring that the Iron Man, a local ogre, would get them. Another Glasgow ghoul was Jenny with the iron teeth, a hideous witch said to have prowled around Glasgow Green in the early 1800s. Jenny was infamous for devouring children who refused to sleep. Diving much further back, the Old Testament book of Daniel speaks of a prophet dreaming of 4 beasts. Behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. As the Gorbals had significant Protestant, Catholic, and Jewish populations, it's possible that a child could have heard about this monster at church or synagogue and told their friends, thereby striking a match amid the vivid imaginations of Glasgow's children. Glasgow's vampires hunt soon made it to the local press, and it wasn't long before the story was picked up by the national papers. While some had rooted the tale in local folklore and biblical passages, others found a different culprit. The American horror comics that were just beginning to get popular within the UK.
It's our fault.
Yeah. Tales from the Crypt and The Vault of Horror were pointed to as fueling the imagination with graphic images of monsters and murder. While we are generally loath to blame pop culture, a 1953 issue of Dark Mysteries included a story called The Vampire with the Iron Teeth, just about a year before the Gorbals vampire incident. There might be something to it.
Yeah.
I hate to blame pop culture, but wow.
I mean, you tell a good story and it becomes a phone tag. And...
Yeah, but anyways, a strange coalition formed to campaign against the comics, composed of teachers, Christians, and, keen to limit the influence of American culture, communists. Very interesting coalition. Anyways, a debate took place in the House of Commons, resulting in the Children and Young Persons Harmful Publications Act of 1955, which banned the sale of repulsive or horrible reading matter to children. The act is still in law today.
I wonder how much is enforced. Probably not.
So anyways, was it the Gorbals vampire, what is the Gorbals vampire legacy? In contrast to the panic of earlier years, the Gorbals now seem proud of their vampire. Residents of the district volunteered to act in a play about the vampire in 2016, and there has been a competition for local school children to create a horror comic and even design a mural in homage to the monster. And that mural is proudly displayed in the Gorbals today on a brick wall at the corner of St. Luke's Place and Bolter Street. So yeah, talk about irony. Going from protecting the school children to actually having the kids
write their own
comics. So yes, the Gorbals vampire, and I'm gonna see if I should be able to find a picture of the mural. I'm sorry, buddy.
You encroached.
Apparently, I did.
Oh dear. All right, so we got another vampire for you. This one is out of the tiny community of Croglin, England. It's a picturesque settlement that was once menaced by a beast that claimed many of the attributes of the classic vampire. The burning-eyed creature would stagger from a family crypt in a lonely churchyard, break into a manor house, plunge its teeth into the necks of young women. Classic vampire. All right, so the tale of the Croglin vampire was made known to a wider public thanks to the inclusion in the story of my life, the autobiography of one Augustus Hare, who lived from 1837 to 1903. A biographer, a travel writer, a recounter, Hare felt his life story merited 6 volumes. Only 6. They were published in 2 batches in 1896 and 1900. Hare, like many Victorians, was fond of a good ghost story and included plenty in his books. He claimed to have heard the account of the Croglin vampire during an after-dinner chat with a Captain Fisher Rowe. Having impressed the assembly company by rattling off some of his eeriest tales, Hare was surprised when Fisher Rowe responded with an even spookier story. Fisher Rowe stated his family owned a large house named Croglin Grange, and that the oddest legend was associated with it. After moving down to Surrey, the Fishers had let the Grange out, but one of their tenants, a young woman, soon endured a petrifying ordeal. She found herself menaced by a vampire from a nearby churchyard. Pardon.
Okay.
That tickle. Alright, Captain Fisher began by stating that they considered the extremely fortunate in their tenants that they had found the two brothers and a sister. Though Fisher couldn't name them, later sources indicated that their surname was Cranswell. The brothers called Edward and Michael, and their sister Amelia. It seems that the Cranswells loved living at Croglin Grange and soon made themselves popular in the surrounding area. To their poorer neighbors, they were kind and generous. To their more fortunate neighbors, considered them a welcome addition to the neighborhood. Their first winter and spring, the Cranswells made themselves quite comfortable at Croglin, but that summer there came a day which was dreadfully hot. The brothers could do nothing more active than lounging under trees reading books. Amelia positioned herself on the veranda, tried to work, though the intense heat soon put that ambition to rest. After dinner, the siblings sat on the veranda, appreciating the evening's slightly cooler air, and soon they were enjoying the sight of the property bathed in a very silvery moonlight. The brothers then found themselves comfortable enough to call it a night, but Amelia was still too hot. She tossed and she turned, took to staring out the window at the glistening beauty of the summer night. After some time, however, she noticed an odd addition to the moon-soaked scene. Two bright lights were flickering around the strip of trees close to the churchyard. The lights soon stopped, dodging in and among the tree trunks, and started to advance across the lawn towards the house. Unable to stop staring at those eerie lights, Amelia realized that they were part of some figure, a figure that seemed to be shambling in the direction of her window. As it grew closer, Amelia's heart quickened. Shivers passed down over her skin. She knew she had to get away. The room's door, however, was near the window, and the beast was approaching, and Amelia knew that unlocking it would put her closer to the creature. She wanted to scream, but her throat seemed paralyzed. The being then turned aside and appeared to stumble away from her window. Amelia had the impression it was going around the house, wasn't coming for her after all. Breaking out of the terror that had made her motionless, Amelia leapt from the bed, dashed to the door, fumbled with the key and the lock, and she heard a scratch, scratch, scratch upon the window. She saw a hideous brown face with flaming eyes glaring at her. She rushed back to bed, but the creature continued to scratch, scratch, scratch. Somewhere in the panic of her mind, Amelia knew that at least the window was locked, so the creature was unlikely to gain entry. The scratching did indeed stop, but now came a pecking sound, and an awful realization flooded over Amelia. The beast was unpicking the lead that held the window in the frame. The peck, peck, pecking went on until the pane fell into the room, shattering into diamonds on the floor, and a long bony finger of the creature came in and turned the handle of the window, and the window opened. The creature clambered in and strode across Amelia's room, but her terror was so great that she could not scream. It came up onto her bed, twisted its long bony fingers into her hair, and it dragged her head over to the side of the bed and bit violently in the throat. As the fiend pierced Amelia's flesh, her voice was released. She let out a horrifying scream, and her brothers were right at her door. Finding it locked, they searched for a poker to lever it open without losing a vital minutes as the creature bit deeper into their sister's neck. With the fire iron, they got the door ajar, rushed into the room, just in time to see the creature escaping through the window. Their sister was unconscious, draped over the side of the bed, bleeding violently from a wound in her throat. One brother chased the vampire, but it scurried off across the lawn with gigantic strides and vanished over the churchyard wall. When Amelia had recovered consciousness and her shock had subsided a little, she said, "What has happened was most extraordinary, and I'm very much hurt. It seems inexplicable, but of course there's an explanation, and we must wait for it." I don't know about you, but I don't think I'd be able to say something that intelligent if I had just been bit in the neck.
Yeah.
Just saying. Anyway, Captain Fisher described Amelia as strong of disposition and not given to romance or superstition, and she soon came up with an idea to account for last night's events. She said, "It will turn out that a lunatic has escaped from some asylum and found his way here." Amelia's wound healed, and she appeared to be getting over the trauma of her experience. Her doctor, however, insisted that to fully recover, she must have a change of scene. Her brothers took her to Switzerland, where they took to climbing mountains, picking and preserving plants, and making sketches. As autumn came on, however, Amelia desired to return to Croglin Grange. Amelia's brothers were also missing their life at Croglin, so they agreed to head back. There was one stipulation that they all agreed on, though, and that was Croglin Grange should be made more secure against future incursions. However, Croglin had only had one story, and it was difficult to make their living arrangements more secure. Amelia occupied her formal bedroom, but it was always closed to shutters at night, though the shutters left the top of the window pane uncovered. The brothers now shared a room opposite Amelia's and kept loaded pistols by their bedsides. The siblings spent a happy and uneventful winter at Croglin, but they did hear something disturbing, reports of animals that were found dead with gashes in their throats. Then one spring night, an ominously familiar noise woke Amelia up. Scratch, scratch, scratch at the window. Nicely timed, dude.
I don't know if you can hear that, but Nico is down
Scratching at a box.
scratching at a box.
She looked up and she saw the same hideous shriveled face she had seen previous summer, and it was staring down at her from the top of the window with its blazing eyes. Amelia let out a huge scream. The brothers leapt from their beds and were soon charging out of the house's front door, clutching their pistols. The creature bolted across the lawn, scampering in its ungainly stride.
How you doing?
Throat. One of the brothers fired and lodged a bullet in its leg, and though limping, the creature kept up its run and again escaped by clambering over the churchyard wall. Although it was too dark to make out, one brother thought he saw it disappearing into a abandoned crypt. The following day, the brothers told Croglin Grange tenants about the ghastly episode of the night before. They assembled a large band of men and went to investigate the vault. Breaking open the doors, they were confronted by the sight of shattered coffins and mangled human remains strewn across the ground. Just one casket was reasonably intact. Its lid, though not attached to the rest of the coffin, lay on top of it loosely. The brothers lifted it to reveal a withered, mummified creature similar to the one they had chased. The vampires had a telltale pistol wound in its leg. Together, they dragged the hideous corpse out of the crypt with the intention of burning it. Some say they pulled the vampire towards a holly tree in the churchyard, and the holly was considered by the folklore as beneficial in such an operation. There, they incinerated the dreadful cadaver, and all the outrages of the Croglin vampires ceased. You can see the holly trees stumped in the Croglin churchyard to this day. Numerous researchers have argued for and against the validity of the Croglin vampire story in the years since. In 1907, Charles G. Harper, an expert on such haunted buildings, claimed he found no evidence Croglin Grange had ever existed. He did stumble across two buildings, Croglin High Hall and Croglin Low Hall, but neither really matched the description of Croglin Grange. Croglin Low Hall came the closest, but it had 2 floors. Also, rather than having a spooky churchyard nestled in the adjacent hollow, Croglin Low Hall is around a mile from the nearest place of worship, St. John the Baptist Church. Though that church has a crypt underneath, there's no vault in this churchyard matching the description of the vampire's mausoleum.
I think Harper jumped the gun a little bit.
Yeah, go for it.
The next researcher to come along was Francis Clive Ross. In a 1963 article for the journal Tomorrow, Clive Ross stated he discovered information that might lend some truth, at least to the setting of Fisher's tale. Clive Ross found out that Croglin Low Hall had actually been known as Croglin Grange until the beginning of the 18th century. The house had originally only had one story, and a second floor had been added. A chapel had also stood nearby, which Historic England's webpage about Croglin Low Hall states that it was knocked down in the 19th century. Clive Ross found that the vampire story indeed seemed to be a long-standing legend in the Fisher Row family. Croglin residents, however, told him that the incident hadn't occurred in the 1870s, but rather way back in the 1680s.
A little bit of a difference.
They were only off by a couple hundred years. Details. In 1978, Mark Alexander wrote in his Haunted Churches and Abbeys of Britain that he'd unearthed an account from a former Croglin rector, the Reverend Dr. Matthews Roberts. Roberts linked a series of vampire attacks to sightings of a bat-like creature in Croglin churchyard. Among the victims of this flying fiend was the daughter of one of Roberts' predecessors, the Reverend Joseph Ireland, who'd officiated at Croglin from 1804 to 1837. During the assault on Miss Ireland, the creature was wounded and fled back to a tomb. The tomb it escaped to was that of the Reverend George Sanderson, who'd served at Croglin in the 17th century. Local rumor asserted the bat had appeared from Sanderson's grave before other vampiric incidents. The findings about the bat were later expanded on by the writer and researcher Jeff Holder in Paranormal Cumbria in 2012. Holder suggested the bat legend may be linked to the religious traumas of the mid to late 17th century. After the English Civil War, Parliament had imposed radical Puritan vicars on a lot of parishes, men who were often unwelcome and disliked. Then, after the monarchy came back, the 1662 Act of Conformity dismissed many of these Puritan priests, replacing them with men loyal to the re-established monarchy and the mainstream Church of England. This double upheaval caused anger, division, and resentment in communities. George Sanderson had at first sided with Parliament, being one of the intruding vicars it had imposed. At the Restoration, however, he abruptly switched sides and was forced on Croglin in 1671 after the sacking of its previous vicar. A turncoat such as Sanderson, who remained at Croglin until his death in 1691, may well have been less than popular. Holder suspects that in the 1680s and 1690s, gossip about Sanderson grew more outlandish and, as the years passed, transformed itself into rumors of malevolent supernatural beings. These legends could have perhaps merged with tales about Croglin Low Hall and the demolished chapel that once stood next to it. In the years since, others have dove into the lineage and lore of the Croglin vampire tale. Some describe it as a fanciful story that evolved over the years. Others have questioned the origins and ownership of Croglin Grange. And others still have studied the storyteller himself, Captain Fisher. Fisher may have linked his family more firmly to both the hall and its legend out of class consciousness. Finding himself at dinner with a well-known writer and other distinguished guests, could Fisher have been tempted to invent an impressive ancestry, one that encompassed not only the generations-long ownership of a family seat, but an aristocratic ghost story to go with it? Perhaps. Regardless of the origins, the Croglin vampire continues to draw vampire enthusiasts and vampire hunters to this small community in northern England today. What?
Bars on the first floors. Always bars on the first floors. Just saying. You could have put bars on the first floor.
But they look tacky.
A gate that closes across and locks from the inside.
That would make sense. We know people are insensible.
Right.
And it's not a recent thing. This goes back hundreds of years.
I know. They probably didn't make closing iron gates at that point in time.
No, probably not. But
They
anyways,
could have made him silver and the vampire would have liked that.
in theory. But Patrick pointed out that also the vampire came in without being invited.
This is true.
So,
So not fully classic.
yeah. As you do.
As you do.
As you do.
Let you take over the last one. Would you like some beer to go with this one?
Yes, I would love some beer. Do you want some whiskey?
I'm good.
You're good. Fine.
I'm good. I have a cat in a very awkward position here.
Yep.
I can't really get comfortable because Vincent is there.
He's quite comfortable.
And I can't, I may not the cat.
Trying
Any comments?
to make sure I didn't miss any questions.
Patrick's been quite busy as
Yes. Thankfully, I love it.
Yes. Dude, we gotta do something. We gotta do something. Buddy.
Yeah. The Puritans were nothing but trouble.
No,
This
they
is
were.
very true.
They were horrible.
Yeah. But anyways, we do have just one last stop for this evening.
And this is the one we were referring to that apparently he's made some interesting.
You're going to have to go ad-lib that because it's not in script.
No, and I didn't read the full article. I didn't have time to. But yeah.
Okay. All right. Anyways, so this last stop for the evening, we head to the dark and gritty outskirts of 1838 East London. In that year, on the night of 20th February, a young woman called Jane Alsop was startled by a violent clanging of the bell on the gate of her father's house in Oldford, a village on the then outskirts of East London. She opened the gate to a man swathed in a dark cloak who claimed to be a police officer. "For God's sake, bring me a light," the man shouted, "for we have caught Spring-Heeled Jack here in the lane." Jane hurried into the house and rushed back bearing a candle. As soon as she handed the candle to the policeman, however, he flung off his cloak to reveal a most hideous and frightful appearance. His eyes glowed like red balls of fire, and as she trembled with terror and shock, Jane saw that he wore a large helmet and tight-fitting clothes that resembled white oilskin. The man opened his mouth and vomited a stream of blue and white flames in the direction of Jane's face. The man sprang forward, grabbed Jane, and, placing her head under his arm, tore at her gown with claws that were of some metallic substance. Jane screamed, managed to slip away, and ran back towards the house. The man bounded after her, caught her on the steps, mauled her arms and neck with his metal talons, and wrenched out some of her hair. But Jane's shrieks had alerted one of her sisters, who came running to help. After a short but intense struggle, the man fled. This incident was widely reported in the newspapers. Far from being an isolated attack, Jane's case fit into a pattern of assaults by a creature known as Spring-Heeled Jack. Spring-Heeled Jack has been described as a ghost, a bear, an armored man, or even a devil. As well as his flaming breath and burning red eyes, many claimed he had the astounding ability to spring or leap great distances, bounding over walls and hedges and even onto house roofs. But who or what was this strange entity who terrorized the London area? Was Spring-Heeled Jack just one person or several? Is there a supernatural element to this tale? The first sightings of Spring-Heeled Jack occurred in 1837. In October that year, Mary Stevens, a servant girl, had been walking along the edge of Clapham Common. A tall figure jumped at Mary from a dark alley. He grabbed hold of her, tore her clothes with claws, and forced kisses on her face. His hands felt cold and clammy as those of a corpse. Mary screamed, and the attacker fled. Her cries alerted several locals who searched for her assailant, but could find no one. The next day, a similar figure sprang in front of a carriage. The carriage crashed, and the coachman was badly injured. According to witnesses, the figure then escaped by leaping over a 9-foot-tall wall while emitting a stream of high-pitched laughter. News of this strange attacker soon spread through London and the surrounding settlements, and it wasn't long before this sinister being was christened Spring-Heeled Jack. The idea arose that his leaping abilities might be due to springs hidden in the heels of his boots, with newspapers like the Morning Chronicle crediting him with spring shoes. Jack, however, didn't always stick with his tall, jumping, metal clawed persona. In early September 1837, a ghost, imp, or devil in form of a large white bull was rumored to have attacked a number of people. Over the next 2 months, Jack was said to have appeared in the guises of a ghost, bear, or devil in over 20 villages around London. Jack is said to have haunted St. John's Wood in late December 1837 and early January 1838, dressed in armor in the guise of a bear. On the western edge of London, he appeared as a devil armed with iron claws, with which he attacked a blacksmith and several women. There were rumors Jack had been seen climbing over the walls of Holland Park and Kensington Palace at midnight to dance fantastic measures on the wooded lawns. Stories of Jack's assaults kept circulating. According to one account, a servant girl, Polly Adams, was attacked on Shooter's Hill by a man who vomited fire in her face and attempted to rip her clothes off. She suspected the man was a gentleman who tried to seduce her earlier the same day. London's outskirts swarmed with rumors of a man who'd hid in unlit lanes before springing out at travelers. After accosting them, he'd escape with the most incredible leaps, sometimes clearing hedges and gates with just one bound. With the metropolis buzzing with tales of this strange predator and the populace's fear and agitation intensifying, the authorities felt they had to act. On the 9th of January, 1838, the Lord Mayor of London held an audience with members of the community where he reviewed the reports that he had received. A creature assaulting ladies in the form of a ghost, a bear, and devil, leaping from dark corners, ringing bells late in the night, depriving women of their senses. The Lord Mayor was skeptical of such reports, but members of his audience echoed the tales, supporting their veracity. The revelations of the Lord Mayor's meeting were reported in the newspapers over the next couple of days, and on the 11th, the mayor held another meeting, packed with anxious citizens, and presenting a heap of letters detailing similar wicked pranks committed in and around London. One correspondent claimed Jack had frightened several women into dangerous fits in the Hammersmith area, and another asserted that in Brixton, Stockwell, and Vauxhall people had even died of fright upon encountering the monster. There were especially strong rumors about a gang of aristocratic rascals connected to high families. Letters alleged that bets to the amounts of £5,000 are at stake upon the success or failure of the abominable proceedings, and that the object of the villains is to destroy the lives of not less than 30 human beings. The mayor still thought the hysteria around Spring-Heeled Jack had inspired the greatest exaggerations, and said he doubted that the ghost performs the feats of a devil upon earth, but he promised that the man responsible for these pantomime displays would be apprehended and punished. The mayor instructed the police to search for the culprit and offered rewards for information leading to his capture. In spite of the mayor's determination to catch Spring-Heeled Jack, reports kept coming in. On the 20th of February 1838, the attack on Jane Alsop occurred, and on the 28th of February, another young woman, Lucy Scales, was the victim of a similar assault. Lucy and her sister were walking through Limehouse, passing along Green Dragon Alley, when they saw a person in a large cloak standing in that narrow thoroughfare. As Lucy passed the person, he vomited a quantity of blue flame into her face, temporarily blinding her. Lucy fell to the ground and began having violent fits, which would go on for several hours. Lucy's assailant, who hadn't attempted to touch her, then strode away. He was described as being tall, thin, and of gentlemanly appearance, to have been carrying a lamp similar to those used by the police, and to have been wearing some sort of headgear. A few days later, in East London's Turner Street, off Commercial Road, a servant boy responded to a vigorous knocking on his master's door. He opened it to see a man wrapped in a cloak. The man threw his cloak back to reveal a bizarre costume and hideous features. The boy screamed so loudly it caused the man to flee. As the man turned to run, the boy is said to have noticed the letter W embroidered on his cloak as part of an ornate, aristocratic-looking crest. After the attacks on Jane Alsop and Lucy Scales, a number of suspects were arrested and questioned, but all were let go. The man most strongly suspected of being Spring-Heeled Jack was one Thomas Milbank, a carpenter who had lived near the Alsops. Milbank, who had apparently made drunken boasts of carrying out the Alsop assault, had been wearing white coveralls and a great coat on the day it occurred. He escaped being charged because the police were convinced he had no ability to breathe fire. That all it takes? Well,
Back then, maybe.
yeah, maybe. Milbank also had been drunk on the night of the attack, and Jane and her sister insisted their assailant was sober. The assaults by Spring-Heeled Jack, or due to his growing fame, those imitating him, copycats, went on. On the 28th of February 1838, a well-dressed man informed the landlady of the White Lion pub in Vere Street that he was Spring-Heeled Jack. The man then produced a club and swung it at a group of women. A man dressed in a cloak seized hold of a lady in Lincoln's Inn Fields and slapped her face, and in Islington, a blacksmith called James Priest was arrested after attacking a number of females. Priest was given 3 months hard labor. In March, 2 tall men in dark cloaks, their faces painted with ochre, frightened a boy in Westmoreland Mews. In Kentish Town, a youth was cautioned after being caught with a mask with blue glazed paper arranged around its mouth, paper meant to mimic Jack's flaming breath. A Kilburn man was fined £4 after pulling off several pranks wearing a bearded mask and sheet. Spring-Heeled Jack was also becoming more active outside the capital. In April, a woman was attacked on the cliff tops at Southend by a gentleman who ripped her clothes and shoved grass into her mouth, prompting the local paper to run the headline, Spring-Heeled Jack at Southend. That same month in Rose Hill, Sussex, a gardener had been terrified by a creature in the shape of a bear or some other 4-footed animal. After startling the gardener, the creature scaled the wall and trotted along it on all fours before leaping down and chasing the gardener. The animal then clambered over the wall and made its escape. Spring-Heeled Jack, meanwhile, was turning into a figure of urban legend. As well as his frequent appearances in the newspapers, sensationalist pamphlets about his exploits were being published, and plays about him performed at cheap theaters. A play of 1840, Spring-Heeled Jack, the Terror of London, depicted Jack as an outlaw driven to attack women because of a betrayal by his own sweetheart. Despite his rising fame, reports of encounters with Spring-Heeled Jack began to dwindle. In 1843, however, there was a fresh surge of sightings across the country. Jack was spotted in Northamptonshire, where he was described as the very large image of the devil himself, with horns and eyes of flame. In East Anglia, Spring-Heeled Jack was held responsible for a series of assaults on the drivers of mail coaches. In July of 1847, Spring-Heeled Jack was alleged to have committed a number of outrages in Teignmouth, Devon. Disguised in a skin coat, which had the appearance of a bullock's hide, skull cap, horns, and mask. The ensuing investigation resulted in one Captain Finch being convicted on 2 accounts of assaulting women. Some also blamed Spring-Heeled Jack for the strange phenomena of the devil's footprints, a 40-mile-long line of mysterious cloven hoof marks, mostly in single file, that appeared in the snow in Devon overnight in 1855. Whoever made the hoof prints seems to have been able to jump over rivers, haystacks, and houses with ease. Sightings of Spring-Heeled Jack once more decreased until there was another panic in the 1870s, and in 1872, the News of the World reported that Peckham was in a state of commotion owing to what is known as the Peckham Ghost, a mysterious figure quite alarming in appearance. This specter, the paper claimed, was actually Spring-Heeled Jack, who terrified a past generation. The ghost was said to be tall and dressed in white. There were references to the Phantom having a flaming face, the ability to leap fences, and a fondness for wearing spring-heeled boots. In one of the most infamous escapades, Jack was accused of harassing soldiers at the large military base in Aldershot, Surrey. At Aldershot's North Camp one evening in March 1877, a sentry saw a strange figure emerge out of the darkness. The sentry shouted a challenge, but the figure strode straight up to him and slapped him several times across the face with an icy corpse-like hand. Other soldiers fired at the intruder, but their bullets had no effect. The figure then vanished into the darkness with astonishing bounds. More incidents occurred in April, and the soldiers grew so unsettled that sentries were given live ammunition and told to shoot the night's terror on sight. But Jack would return to torment more sentries at the end of the summer. In the autumn of 1877, Spring-Heeled Jack appeared in Lincoln wearing the skin of a sheep. A mob chased him, but his usual bounds and jumps, Jack escaped. Jack apparently leapt distances of 20 feet or more as he sprang across rooftops and even bounded right over a Roman monument called Newport Arch. A few citizens shot at him, but Jack seems impervious to their bullets. In 1904, there were reports of him in Liverpool. Here, he is said to have taunted residents by bounding 25 feet up onto the house roofs, then jumping down onto the street again. Locals described him as sporting a mask, long boots, and a black cloak. After the incident in Liverpool, Jack seems to have faded into history and folklore. People have had many years to debate Spring-Heeled Jack's story. Even at the time of his first assault, most people didn't consider Spring-Heeled Jack to be a supernatural being, but rather an individual or individuals in disguise who had a macabre sense of humor. Many suspected Jack's outrages were perpetrated by a group of noblemen as part of a wager. Popular rumor pointed to the young Irish aristocrat, the Marquis of Waterford, as the main culprit. The Marquis was frequently in the news for his drunken brawling, violent practical jokes,
There we go.
and participation in outlandish bets. The term "paint the town red" comes from an episode involving the Marquis and his friends. After finding some red paint lying around in Mulberry, they went on a drunken rampage, spattering houses and pubs while beating and painting red any police officers who tried to stop them. There's evidence the Marquis of Waterford might have been Spring-Heeled Jack. The Marquis was famous for his disdain towards women. He already had a reputation for amusing himself by springing on travelers unaware to frighten them, and he is also known to have been in London around the time of the first Spring-Heeled Jack assaults. The Marquis was noted as a sportsman, boxer, and equestrian. So, though no human could have performed Jack's more outlandish feats, an athletic man like the Marquis may have been able to leap surprising distances and bounds over gates. The boy in Turner Street apparently noticed a W on Jack's cloak as he fled as well, maybe a W for Waterford. As well as having the sadistic character and physical capabilities to undertake at least some of Spring-Heeled Jack's crimes, the Marquis had the money and resources. In the days before mass public transportation, few commoners would have had the cash or time to crisscross London and its suburbs in the way Jack did. But this would have been less of a challenge for a nobleman in a coach. Wealth would also have been needed to procure items like suits of armor and bearskins. Many, including the authorities, felt a whole group of noblemen might be involved, and there's some evidence Jack didn't act alone. 3 men beat Jones the carpenter, and Jane Alsop's father suspected his daughter's assailant may have had a helper. The lull in Jack's activities after 1839 could have resulted from the bet being fulfilled or those posing as Spring-Heeled Jack becoming alarmed by the attention the press and the police were focusing on the case. Imitators or spreading mass hysteria could then explain the later incidents. The Marquis of Waterford may have carried out the earlier assaults like those on Jane Alsop and Lucy Scales, but he couldn't have been the perpetrator of Spring-Heeled Jack's later outrages. Around 1842, the Marquis seemed to have reformed. He married and settled down in County Waterford, where he apparently led an exemplary life before dying in a riding accident in 1859. Another possibility was Spring-Heeled Jack the product of mass hysteria. Even with a certain amount of skepticism from the authorities and press, and while many accept that Jack's escapades may have resulted from a sinister wager, some sightings of Jack are suspected of being the product of an overexcited imagination. Investigations by journalists showed that the glimpses of Jack in the form of a large white bull were caused by nothing more than a white-faced heifer. Some of the accounts of ghosts were shown to stem from the sight of a police officer in a white uniform on a horse. The reports of Jack scaling the walls of Kensington Palace to dance on its lawns were found to be inspired by an unrelated episode from 1822. As Jack's fame expanded, it seems that a number of assaults, crimes, and acts of hooliganism were added to Jack's reign of terror. Even though they may have been something more commonplace, that is to, of course, not downplay the nature of the crimes. In addition, pranksters, criminals, and predators may have mimicked aspects of Jack's legend to disorient and terrify their victims. So, even if Spring-Heeled Jack may be more human than mythological, that does not detract from his legendary and lasting impact on the lore of Britain.
So one thing we didn't find when we originally researched this is that apparently during the Jack the Ripper murders in 1888, there was a letter signed by Spring-Heeled Jack, the Whitechapel murderer, that emerged, but it was actually later considered unlikely that Jack was the actual Jack the Ripper. Just somebody trying to confuse things. But yeah, the sightings of Spring-Heeled Jack dwindled towards the end of the 19th century, but continued to be reported into the 20th century, including an account of a man leaping high in Herefordshire in 1986 and in Ewell in 2012.
So, and my mother actually asked, any chance did Jack the Ripper's activities occur around the same time period?
Yeah.
So there was overlap.
Yeah.
Not with
the original man who was the Marquis, but it would have been one of the imitators later on.
because that was Victorian era England, late or the 1880s, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah,
So,
1888.
1888, and that's, yes, there was a resurgence of Spring-Heeled Jack at the same time as the Jack the Ripper murders.
Yeah, and a lot of people think that Freddy Krueger may have been slightly based on Spring-Heeled Jack.
There could be some.
With the talons and the ripping
I could
and going after women. Slightly.
Didn't we in our pop
We
culture
did.
though? Wasn't there somebody pinned the inspiration for Freddy Krueger on something else?
Well, it was on the dream nightmare aspect. Of
Yes, that's
So
right.
I think if you combine these two together, you really get the full.
I could see that. Yeah. So and also W for Windsor.
Yeah.
Yeah. So. So Patrick, so if they found someone who breathed fire, but it wasn't blue fire, would they have also been let off the hook?
I mean, you breathe a little alcohol out of your mouth into a flame, and guess what?
Yeah, but yeah, and we could have gone on and on. I actually wound up trimming down, I think, the Spring-Heeled Jack stuff by about a third. So there's so much more. Now, granted, most of what I trimmed was some of the other individual assaults that took place.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not talking about like clipping out any like huge segments of time or anything like that, but there are so many reports, detailed reports from people who say they were attacked by Spring-Heeled Jack. And I also trimmed some of the other cities as well. Because he really, eventually, he went coast to coast in England. It was pretty impressive.
He's one of the biggest legends in British folklore.
Yes. That's still very impactful today. Impactful. It's a word.
maybe not the best word, but it's a word.
Yeah. So History Tone is actually the one who put out the update.
Oh, okay.
And it was just reposted on my folklore page.
Cool. But that does bring us to a close for this evening.
Yes. And what is our next one?
Good question.
And I will look.
It
It is Ghost Ships and Legends of the Sea. Or something like that.
And it is split 2 weeks.
2 weeks. It'll be our last one in September.
We'll talk about it off the air. We need to reschedule the October one.
Okay.
We need to reschedule for ourselves. We haven't actually put it out there yet, so you don't know when we initially had it on the calendar.
It might not be until the very last week of October.
We'll figure it out. But anyways, so yes. Yeah. We will be back in 2 weeks. After
that, we got to figure it out because, October's busy.
October is very busy.
Very busy. There's like a 2 week stretch where we don't stop before we even get to the end of October.
Yeah, and that's not even close to the end of October.
No, it's the middle of October.
So,
but just to let y'all know, Nightmare Weekend in October, we're going to be vending, and we actually have had all 4 of our panels approved. So we will put more information out about that once we know when and where they will be.
what our schedule is. So, but in the short term, you can come see us at Comic-Con.
Yep.
You can come out on one of our tours.
Yep.
You can keep an eye out for us if you come by Oktoberfest.
Yep.
At St. Benedict's Oktoberfest.
And of course, the skeletal display is out for Halloween. I finished it this week. So
there will be some pictures at some point.
Yeah, come on the Churchill Chillers tour and you will walk right by it.
Yep. And who knows, maybe in October, maybe we wind up doing a night that's not a Monday.
I think it might have to not be a Monday because
Mondays.
all of the Mondays except for the 28th are booked.
I know. So, one thing at a time.
We'll figure it out.
We will figure it out. And so, yeah, thank you all for watching, for checking this out. And we will, again, at the very least, we will be back in 2 weeks. And then we'll go from there.
Yep.
We'll be back. We'll be back.
We'll be back.
We'll be back.
Oh, what we forgot to mention also, Hanover Autumn Fest. We will be vending there.
Oh, did we finalize that?
I'm getting a contract sent to us.
Oh, okay. Well, we do have a show before that.
Yes.
So.
But that's on the 28th.
Yes. Oh, and there's Beverly just mentioned, got tickets again for Ghost Walks at Night.
We'll be there as well.
Oh, and yep, and that's right. I was the guide last year. So
yes, I think I'm actually going to be a ghostie this year.
Yep. So excellent. We'll look forward to seeing you there, Beverly. But yes, the Ghost Walks at Night. That's over a month from now. It's about a month and a half from now.
But tickets are on sale, and they do sell out. So snag those.
Yes, do snag those.
That's at Hanover Tavern.
At Hanover Tavern. So go to hanovertavern.org and you can
look at their events page. It's the October 21st, 22nd, 23rd?
Sounds right.
21st, 22nd, 23rd. Haha.
So Beth and I
No,
will
I take that back. 20th, 21st, 22nd.
Sunday, Monday, Tuesday.
Sunday, Monday, Tuesday.
Then Beth and I will be there all 3 nights.
Yep.
Being spooky, doing spooky stuff.
Yep.
All to raise some funds and have some fun with Hanover Tavern.
Yep.
So, with that, we're going to go ahead. I'm going to... I'll go ahead. I'll stop the broadcast. I will go back. I will
post
check
links.
Check. I'll post some links. I will check, make sure I didn't miss anything in the chat. Sorry if I have missed anything in the chat, but anyways, I will go ahead. I will check that out. And in the meantime,
we will see you in 2 weeks, if not before, on something else.
In the meantime,
stay spooky, y'all. Bye, Vincent.